Welcome back, folks, to my Final Fantasy VII New Threat 2.0 series. Today we're going to be going through a number of bosses along with how to get a very powerful accessory on Disc 1. You don't want to miss that. Don't forget to subscribe for more Final Fantasy content, and without any further ado, the first of today's bosses. We previously defeated Lost Number over at the Shinra Mansion, and now having made our way over to Mount Nibble, we will face off against the formidable Materia Keeper. Sure you folks remember this thing from the original Final Fantasy VII. Well, surprise, surprise, it's now received a number of buffs for New Threat 2.0. First of all, it has 8,400 HP, and couple that with its nasty ability to spam Cure 2 on itself for about 1,200 HP of healing. This is going to be quite the prolonged fight. It also has the frustrating tendency of casting a number of negative status ailments on the party, such as Mini and Slow, so it's important to try and go into the battle guarding against as many of these as possible. The White Cape will certainly come in useful. In terms of resistances and weaknesses, do not bother bringing lightning, earth or poison magic to this fight, but do bring fire. This boss does not like being burned, and if you have access to fire too, which you should do by this point, then definitely start casting that, because you're going to be at least nullifying his Cure 2 spells with about 1,200 points of damage. Make sure your strongest magic caster at least has access to that spell. It is also worth noting that the Materia Keeper itself is susceptible to a number of status ailments, including Silence and Darkness. Now, just as we did against Lost Number, you can unleash the Fury of Ares Seal Evil ability in order to prevent this thing from casting spells, but unlike in the fight with Lost Number, the Materia Keeper does have the ability to remove status effects, so they're probably not going to be lasting all that long. As with many bosses in the New Threat 2.0 mod, you don't want to destroy them as quickly as you perhaps otherwise would in the original game, because you're going to want to actually morph these things. Now, there is a steal for the Materia Keeper, and that is for an Earth Mallet. Not all that exciting, but it's there if you want it. And if you do want to take the time to morph this thing, then you can get a Bolt Armlet from it. And then finally, of course, you are going to want to just manage your own party's defenses. I recommend using Barrier All. Time All with Haste would be pretty nice as well. This boss does like to cast slow. And just make sure you stay on top of healing. This fight isn't the most difficult we've encountered so far. Certainly nowhere near as frustrating as the Gene Nanak fight in Cosmo Canyon. Oh, still have nightmares about that one. Keep persevering and you'll get it down without too much trouble. Next up, the Shinra executive Palmer, and this guy, he is tough. Fooled you. He's actually a complete pushover. He has a measly 6,000 HP, and since all of his abilities rely on MP, you can completely nullify Palmer with a single round of Barrett's Mind Blow Limit Break. On top of that, he doesn't even have anything to steal or morph. There's really no point to prolong the inevitable. Hit him with your hardest abilities, and his tea drinking days will be over. Now that we've gained access to the Tiny Bronco, we can finally head over to the Wutai continent, and when we land on the southern part of that continent, there is an enemy that can be found on the beach known as an Adaman Bangle. Now, the Adaman Bangle has an item that can be morphed called the Adaman Bangle, and this is a piece of armor you are going to want to get because it has triple materia growth. Beautiful, especially on Disc 1. And the good thing about this being a random enemy encounter, we can farm as many of these as we have the patience to do. We can get our whole party decked out in triple materia growth armor if we wish to do so, and let's be honest, we probably do. However, unlike the previous boss fight, the Adaman Bangle is certainly no pushover, and it took quite a few attempts over at live stream with chat and myself to try and figure out the most time-saving strategy to defeat this thing with the morph ability. The annoying thing is that it has 2,600 HP, but huge defenses. Defenses to magic, defenses to physical attack. Even your morph command on your strongest party member is only going to be doing about 3 to 5 points of damage. So what's the solution? Well, here's what we did. We equipped Cloud, our strongest attacking party member, with the morph command. We equipped Ares, our strongest magical character, with the enemy skill materia with laser learned. And we equipped our third party member, in my case Barrett, with the manipulate ability. But you might want to throw somebody else as your third party member with a higher luck stat, just so you can manipulate a little bit more often. Now, the reason you want to manipulate is because you can effectively then make the enemy useless so that you can spend as much time as needed in depleting its HP without killing it. And it is going to take quite a few rounds. As I said, most abilities are not going to do much due to the high defenses of this enemy, but laser does actually help quite a bit. Now, it does about 800 plus points of damage for me in a single cast, or if the enemy casts magic barrier, that is reduced to about 500. So you might want to go ahead and bring D-barrier in order to get rid of that magic barrier just to speed things up. It's not really needed, and if you manipulate fairly early on in the encounter, then it might not even get those barriers cast anyhow. Now, while laser is fantastic for doing the bulk of the damage in this fight, you're going to have to stop casting it when the enemy gets down to about 850 HP. At which point, you're going to need to start using other abilities. For this, I just moved over to other magic attacks. They do so little damage that you're unlikely to kill the creature by casting them, but you are going to be still doing more damage than simply by casting Morph. And once you've got the enemy to about 15-20 HP, then that's when you can start unleashing the Morph command. For very low damage, but by that point, it's only going to take a few rounds anyhow. Once you've got the gist of the fight, then you can encounter it as many times as you need in order to get as many Adaman Bangles as you wish to do. Next up, we have Don Corneo's new pet as our boss fight, and this is, of course, Raps. Now, Raps is a difficult fight because you're not going to have access to your materia. Yuffie's already gone off with it. However, she tends to leave you with a little bit, so make sure you check your bags. You never know. You might have some helpful bits and bobs. In fact, for me, I had some powerful ice magic and some cure magic spells as well. I didn't have any all materia to cast those cure magics, but it was better than trying to spam through potions. Raps has quite a lot of HP for a materia-less party at 9,000, so be prepared that this battle might go on for a little bit. Any high damaging items you can throw, you should probably move towards the top of the item list before the battle begins. In particular, Deadly Waste is a good one since you are actually able to poison Raps by using it, which will just help with damage going throughout the fight. Now, don't worry, you're probably not going to have access to Steal and Morph, but there is nothing to steal and Morph from Raps, though he does drop the Peace Ring, which is a nice accessory to get. And depending on what materia and items you do have at your disposal, it is worth noting that Raps is weak to the water and wind elements. Now, he does like to cast his own magical abilities. However, unlike some of the previous boss fights, unfortunately, Raps is not going to be susceptible to Seal Evil's silence status. However, limit breaks are going to come into their own here because they are going to become the bulk of the damage that you're going to be dishing out. In the case of Cloud, I actually tried equipping him with the Curse Ring. Yes, it means we're going to have to resurrect him every 60 seconds, but the huge boost to his strength stat should really help with trying to get through this fight a little bit more quickly. At least that was the theory. It seemed to work out. I don't know whether it's better to use it or not use it, however. Now, the biggest challenge is, of course, going to be keeping up with healing. Raps does like to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, and hopefully you'll have access to some cure magic to get through that, but if not, then make sure you do have some high healing items moved up to the top of the list. Also, it probably won't hurt to have Ares in the party, even if not for Seal Evil, just to cast Healing Wind whenever it becomes available. Ultimately, I never really discovered any super slick strategies for Raps. It was just a case of staying on top of healing, resurrecting dead party members, and unleashing limit breaks to deal a lot of damage when we were able to do so. Stick to that plan, and you should get through this encounter without too much hassle. Finally, for today, we have the Red Dragon boss fight, or the Temple Dragon, as it is now known in New Threat 2.0, the first of two boss fights that we are going to be encountering here in the Temple of the Ancients. For basic stats, the Red Dragon has 9,800 HP, it is weak to water, and it is susceptible to both silence and darkness, so once again bringing Ares with her Seal Evil is going to be helping out a fair bit. Now, you can also steal and morph from the Red Dragon, so make sure you have the appropriate command materia equipped. In terms of the steal, that's going to be for an Adaman clip, and in terms of the morph, that's going to be a Dragon Armlet. Both are quite nice, and you're not going to want to miss out. The Temple Dragon has a number of abilities up its arsenal, some of which will be removed once you've managed to silence the boss, but bear in mind its other abilities are still going to be hitting quite hard. Therefore, I do recommend that you actually spend a little bit of time buffing your own party with spells such as Haste or Barrier. Just make sure that you have all materia linked to these. Don't forget, of course, to bring your highest level cure magic as well. You're going to be using that quite a bit throughout the encounter. The Temple Dragon is weak to the water element, so using Aqua Lung is going to go a long way to removing some of its high HP levels. But as this is a morph boss, ultimately you're just going to have to slog your way through, making sure that your party members are able to survive, whilst you spend a little bit of time bringing the boss down to low HP, and then quite a few turns casting that morph command in order to get the dragon armlet. Oh, a bit of a side note, the Temple Dragon is actually able to be afflicted with the poison element, which might sound good, but when you're trying to morph, it can be a bit of a nuisance. I had Sid, and his weapon, as you can see, auto-applies the poison effect, which means that I had to mess about casting an antidote later on in the fight, so that the Temple Dragon wasn't defeated before I was able to get the dragon armlet. Of course, the simple solution is not to cast the poison element, but I wanted to point this out because I'd completely forgotten that I had Sid even equipped with a weapon that applied poison automatically. So yeah, you can just remove that with an antidote. Also, maybe you guys have noticed this as well. You probably saw a minute ago that I did cast Meteor Aim, which is Cloud's first level 3 limit break. I only just learned that recently before this encounter. Is it the case that Final Fantasy VII New Threat has nerfed how fast you learn limit? Because my characters have been killing a lot of enemies, and many of my party members are still only on their level 1 limits. They seem to be very slow to learn, much slower than normal anyhow. Regardless, limit breaks are still going to be doing a whole load of damage, which is helpful even if they are only level 1. There's not much else to really say about these boss fights. Just make sure, as I say, you stay on top of healing and just try and keep the boss silent, and even afflicted with darkness if you're able to do that, just to reduce the damage you're taking while focusing on morphing the dragon armlet. The red dragon's not the most difficult encounter, but I'm a little bit nervous about facing off against Demon's Gate, the next boss fight, which I will be doing in the next episode. Yeah, that thing used to give me nightmares as a child. It was so difficult back in 1997 when I had a very underdeveloped party, did not know about grinding in role-playing games or any of that jazz. So come back next time to find out if that fight has indeed been made even tougher than it was before. But I do hope you folks have enjoyed spending a little bit of time with me today as we've made our way through the next part of Final Fantasy VII New Threat 2.0. Don't forget, I'm currently live streaming the game over at Twitch, so if you haven't checked that out and stopped by to say hello, then please do consider doing so. That would be awesome. But I hope you folks have a wonderful day. Let me know of your thoughts down in the comments regarding the various encounters we've contended with, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.